The dog hit the door before it finished opening. Not a bark, not a warning. Just 90 pounds of Belgian Malinois slamming into the reinforced steel like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment, and maybe he had. The handler outside, a young corpsman named Tate, who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days, yanked the lead and said, "Jax, heel," but Jax wasn't listening to Tate anymore. Jax was listening to whatever instinct had kept him and his handler alive through 14 months in Helmand Province, and right now that instinct was pointed directly at the woman standing in the doorway of room 7 with a blood pressure cuff in her hand. Nurse Elara Voss did not run. That was the thing people got wrong about her later, when they reconstructed what happened at Mercy Regional on that particular Tuesday in April. They assumed she must have stepped back, must have flinched, must have done something to de-escalate the situation the way the hospital's security manual instructed. She didn't. She stood in the doorway and looked at the dog, and the dog looked at her, and neither of them moved for what felt like a very long time. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from that room." The voice came from the man in civilian clothes standing behind Tate. He had a badge clipped to his belt and the kind of posture that said federal without saying anything at all. Special Agent Dax Reiner, she would learn later. NCIS. He had been at the hospital for 6 hours already, and in those 6 hours he had managed to make every nurse on the floor feel like a suspect without once raising his voice. "I'm his nurse," Elara said. "He's due for vitals. Someone else can do that. Someone else isn't assigned to him." Reiner looked at her the way men like him look at people who don't immediately comply, not angry, just calculating, like he was running a quick threat assessment and she was coming up's borderline. "What's your name?" "Voss. Elara Voss." He wrote it down. He actually wrote it down, right there in front of her, which she found both irritating and slightly impressive. Most people who wanted to intimidate you at least pretended they weren't doing it. "The patient in room 7 is a protected witness under federal custody," Reiner said. "Nobody goes in without my sign-off. Your patient," she said, "has a systolic reading from 2 hours ago that I don't like. If his pressure drops again and I'm standing out here filling out paperwork, I need you to be comfortable explaining that to the attending." A pause. Jax sat finally, though his eyes never left her. 5 minutes, Reiner said. She went in. The man in the bed was younger than she'd expected. She'd built a picture in her head from the fragments of overheard conversation. Federal custody, NCIS, the way the corpsman had spoken in lowered voices all morning, and the picture she'd built was older, harder, someone who looked like what he'd been through. Instead, he was maybe 32, 33, with the kind of face that might have been boyish once and was working its way toward something else. There were IVs in both arms, a pressure bandage on his left side, a bruise along his jaw that had gone purple-green overnight. His name, according to the chart, was Griffin Hale. He was awake when she came in, which surprised her. His eyes tracked to her immediately, not the slow, blurry focus of someone pulling out of sedation, but sharp and immediate and assessing the same way the dog outside had looked at her. "Blood pressure," she said. "Routine. Nothing about this is routine," he said. His voice came out rougher than it probably sounded normally, scraped raw somewhere along the way. "From my end it is." She wrapped the cuff around his arm and hit the button, and they both waited in silence while the machine did its work. The number that came back was better than 2 hours ago, not good enough for her to stop worrying. She noted it, adjusted the IV rate by 2 clicks, noted that too. "You're not scared of Jax," he said. "Should I be?" He seemed to think about this seriously. "Most people are. I grew up with German shepherds," she said. "Different energy, but the same basic grammar." She capped her pen and looked at him directly for the first time since she'd come in. "He's protecting you." "That's his job." "It's more than his job," she said. "He's been sitting outside that door for 6 hours. Tate took him out twice to relieve himself, and he came back at a dead run both times." She pulled the blanket up slightly on his right side, where the air conditioning was hitting hardest. "Whatever happened to you out there, Jax was part of it." Griffin Hale looked at her for a moment without speaking. Something shifted in his expression, something small. 14 months, he said finally. She nodded once and didn't push. She picked up her chart and moved toward the door, and he said behind her, "Voss." She turned. "Don't let them rotate you off this floor." She didn't answer. She went back out into the hallway, where Reiner was waiting with his arms crossed and Jax was watching the door, and she wrote her notes in the station at the end of the hall and tried to figure out what it was that was bothering her about room 7. It took her until her break to realize what it was. The window latch was broken, and the scratch marks on the inside of the frame were fresh. She didn't go to Reiner first. That was probably the thing he held against her later, and she understood why. But she'd been a nurse long enough to know that the first person you tell something to shapes every conversation after it. She went to her charge nurse, a woman named Beverly Stroud, who had been running this floor for 21 years and had a gift for separating the important from the urgent. Beverly looked at the photo Elara had taken on her phone and said, without any particular expression, "When did you notice this?" "About an hour ago. During my last check, and the latch? Looks like it's been worked. Not broken by accident." Beverly set the phone down on the desk. "I'm going to call Reiner," she said. "You're going to finish your rounds. Don't go back into room 7 until I tell you to. His pressure? I'll have Tomas cover it." Elara went back to her rounds. She checked on the woman in 3, who was recovering from a hip replacement and wanted to know if her daughter had called. She changed the dressing on the man in 9, who had a post-surgical infection that wasn't responding as well as anyone hoped. She stood in the hallway outside room 12 for a moment longer than she needed to, because room 12 was at the far end and had a window that faced the same exterior wall as room 7. The exterior wall had a ledge. She went back to the nurse's station and pulled up the building schematics on the maintenance portal, which she technically had access to because she was on the hospital safety committee and had been for 3 years. She looked at the ledge. She looked at where it ran. She thought about the scratch marks on the inside of the frame, which meant someone had been working the latch from the outside, which meant someone had been on that ledge, and the ledge connected to the fire escape on the building's south side, which anyone could access from the parking structure on level 2. She picked up the phone and called Reiner directly. He answered on the second ring. "The scratch marks on the window frame in room 7 are from someone trying to get in from outside," she said. "The south fire escape connects to the parking structure. If whoever did this still has access to the building, Ems. Voss, Dr. Harrington's on tonight. He has access to the pharmacy, the service corridors, and the south stairwell. So does the overnight facility supervisor. I don't know who you've cleared and who you haven't, but you should probably know that 4 people have keys to that corridor who aren't on your radar." A silence on the other end that was different from his earlier silences. Less calculating, more listening. "How do you know about the service corridors?" "Safety committee. I've been walking these floors for 6 years. I know every door that doesn't lock right and every camera that points the wrong direction." She paused. "I'm not trying to do your job. I'm telling you what I know because someone came within a foot of your protected witness last night and you didn't know it happened." Another silence. "Come down to the security office," he said finally. "I have 2 more patients to check. After that." She went to check her patients. She noticed on the way back to the station that Jax was standing again, not sitting. Standing, with his weight shifted forward and his ears up, focused on the end of the corridor near the service door. She trusted that more than any camera. She stopped at the station and said to Tate quietly, "What's he seeing?" Tate looked at Jax and then at the service door. "I don't know. He started about 10 minutes ago. Has Reiner been told? I just texted him." She looked at the service door. It had a small rectangular window reinforced with wire mesh. The corridor on the other side was dark. She watched it for a moment and then went to the security office, because whatever was going to happen next, she wanted to be in the room where decisions were being made. What happened next was this. A man named Clifford Pace, who had been working overnight facilities maintenance at Mercy Regional for 4 months, was found in the South Service corridor at 11:47 p.m., with a hospital ID badge that wasn't his and a prepaid cell phone with 3 outgoing calls to an unregistered number. He was detained without incident, though he gave 2 different stories in the first 10 minutes and went silent after that. Elara learned this the following morning, arriving for her shift to find 2 additional federal agents on the floor and a new protocol for entry into room 7 that now required 2 forms of ID and a radio check with the security desk. Reiner was waiting for her at the nurse's station. "Your instinct about the service corridor," he said. "How did you know to look there?" "I didn't," she said. Jax told me. He looked at her. He shifted his alert posture toward the service door. He'd been watching the main corridor all day. When that changed, it meant something changed. She put her bag in her locker and reached for her stethoscope. He's better at this than any camera you have. Reiner seemed to be recalibrating something. You have a background in nursing, she said. 6 years. Before that, I did 2 years with the National Guard. Medical support, not combat. She looked at him. Is that what you were going to ask? Then no. I don't have a background in federal investigations. I have a background in paying attention. She closed her cocker. How's his pressure this morning? Stable. Better than yesterday. Good. She started down the hall. I'd like to go in. This time, Reiner didn't make her wait. Griffin was sitting up when she came in, which was better. The color in his face was better too, and the guarded tension around his eyes had eased by some fraction she couldn't have quantified but could see clearly. He watched her check his vitals the same way he'd watched her yesterday, tracking, evaluating, but the assessment felt different now. Less like a threat calculation, more like recognition. Heard there was some activity last night, he said. Your dog noticed it first, she said. Something moved in his expression. Jax was watching the corridor? South service door. About 10 minutes before the agents got there. She made a note and looked up. Has he always done that? Flagged things before you did? In the field, yeah. He was quiet for a moment. We lost a guy. His name was Cortez. Jax signaled 40 seconds before the IED. It wasn't enough time to. He stopped, started again somewhere else. After that, we all started watching him more. She nodded and didn't fill the silence, which was something nurses learned and most people didn't. That silence, held correctly, wasn't empty. It was an invitation. He doesn't trust easily, Griffin said. New people, especially. After we got back, I had a therapist who came to the house twice a week for 4 months. Jax sat in the corner and watched her every single session. Never moved, never approached her. He glanced toward the door. He let you in on the first day. I smelled like my parents' dog, she said. Probably, maybe. He didn't sound entirely convinced, but he didn't push it. She finished her notes. She was halfway to the door when he said, Voss, the guy they picked up last night. Reiner tell you anything about him? Not my clearance level, she said. No, a pause. You should be careful is what I'm saying. This floor, the people who know you've been talking to them, that gets noticed. She turned around. He was watching her with that same flat, direct attention he'd been giving her since she walked in on day 1. I appreciate that, she said, genuinely. But I've been on this floor for 6 years. I know where the exits are. He almost smiled. Almost. I know, he said. That's what worries me. The second incident happened 3 days later, and it didn't come through the service corridor. It came through admitting. A woman arrived at 4:20 a.m. presenting with chest pain, accompanied by a man who identified himself as her husband. They were put in a bay 2 rooms down from Griffin. The woman's symptoms were consistent with anxiety. Elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, no cardiac indicators on the initial EKG, and Elara might have treated it as exactly that if she hadn't noticed during the intake that the man who said he was the husband hadn't touched his wife once. Not once. No hand on the back, no reaching for her hand while she lay on the bed, no reflexive lean-in when the nurse asked her questions. He stood 2 feet away from her and watched the hallway. Elara went to the charge desk and called Reiner. I might be wrong, she said. Tell me anyway, she told him. He was on the floor in 4 minutes. The man was gone in 5, through the ER exit before anyone could get a clear look, which meant he'd known the layout and had a secondary route already planned. The woman, whose name was not the name on the intake form and whose chest pain was real but not cardiac, was moved to a different floor by 5 a.m. She cried when they transferred her and didn't say why. When Elara came back to the 7th floor, Jax was in the hallway outside room 7 and he was facing her as she came off the elevator. He watched her walk the length of the corridor. When she was 3 feet from the door, he stood, walked to her, and pressed his head briefly against her leg. She put her hand on his head for a moment. Tate, watching from the far end of the hall, didn't say anything. She went in to do Griffin's morning vitals. He was awake, had been for a while by the look of him, and he said before she could speak, What happened? Attempted access through admitting, she said. Different approach, they're getting creative. His jaw tightened. Reiner handled it, she said. They got the woman out. Was she? She's okay. Scared but okay. She wrapped the cuff around his arm. The people coming after you. How many? A long pause. Enough, he said. Are they going to stop? Another pause, longer. Not until the trial, he said. Maybe not after. She noted his blood pressure, good, stable, better than yesterday, and capped her pen and looked at him directly. How long until the trial? 6 weeks. Then you need to be healthy enough to get there, she said. That's my job. The rest is Reiner's. She moved toward the door. Get some sleep. Your body is still doing more work than you realize. Voss. She stopped. The thing in admitting. How did you know the man wasn't her husband? She thought about it. He wasn't worried about her, she said. He was worried about the room. Griffin was quiet for a moment. Then, you would have been good at this. The other thing. I'm good at this thing, she said, and she left. On the morning of the 6th day, Reiner asked her to come to the conference room at the end of the hall. It was the room they used for family meetings and, twice a month, for the hospital ethics committee, and it smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. He had a folder on the table, but he didn't open it. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to understand that I'm not telling you because I'm required to. I'm telling you because I think you've earned it. She waited. Griffin Hale was undercover for 2 years, Reiner said. He built a case against a network that's been running weapons and contract fraud through 3 military bases. The trial is in 41 days. He's the primary witness and also the person who can decode approximately 900 pages of encrypted communication. He paused. The people trying to reach him aren't random. They are organized, they have resources, and at least one of them has had access to this building before this week? Before this admission. He looked at her steadily. We believe someone on staff may have passed information, not necessarily aware of what it was for. A schedule here, a room assignment there. Elara sat with this for a moment. You've been watching my staff. We've been watching everyone, including me, initially. He held her gaze. Not anymore. She thought about the woman in admitting who had cried when they moved her. She thought about Jax standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., watching a door that nobody else was watching. She thought about Griffin Hale saying, not until the trial, maybe not after, in the flat, matter-of-fact tone of someone who had made their peace with a thing and kept moving anyway. What do you need from me? She said. What you've been doing, Reiner said. You see things we don't. You have access to this floor in ways we don't. And people trust you. Patients, staff. You notice when something's off before it becomes a problem. He paused. I'm not asking you to be an agent. I'm asking you to keep being a nurse. She thought about that distinction. I can do that, she said. The breach came on day 9 at 2:17 in the morning, and it came from the inside. Not Pace, who was still in federal custody, not a stranger from admitting or a figure on a ledge. It was a man named Roy Aldrin who had worked the overnight pharmacy desk for 11 years and had a daughter in debt to people he hadn't told anyone about. He had a key card and a syringe and a plan that would have looked, on paper, like a medication error. He made it to the doorway of room 7. He didn't make it inside. Jax hit the door the same way he'd hit it on the first day, 90 pounds and 0 warning. And Aldrin dropped the syringe and went down hard in the doorway, and Tate was on him in seconds with Reiner behind him, and the hallway filled with people and noise and the efficient, terrible machinery of a situation that had almost gone a completely different way. Elara was at the nurse's station at the far end of the hall when it happened. She heard Jax first, not a bark, the same impact sound she'd heard 9 days ago, and she was already moving before she understood why. By the time she reached room 7, it was over. Aldrin was restrained. Tate was on the radio. Reiner was crouched over the syringe on the floor, already gloved, already documenting. 3 other agents had appeared from somewhere she hadn't known they were. She went past all of it and into the room. Griffin was sitting up in bed. The monitors were going. His pressure had spiked, not surprising, and he had both hands flat on the mattress in the posture of someone who had trained themselves not to reach for a weapon that wasn't there anymore. Hey, she said. He looked at her. Something in his face came loose by about 1 degree. Hey, he said. She checked his monitors. She adjusted nothing because nothing needed adjusting. His body had handled it. The spike was already trending down. She stood next to the bed in the particular way she had learned to stand, which was near enough to be present and far enough to give a person room to be whatever they needed to be, and she said nothing for a while. Outside in the hall, she could hear Reiner's voice. low and controlled, talking to someone on the phone. Jax stopped him, Griffin said. Jax stopped him, she agreed. He was right outside the door. I could hear him, but I couldn't. He stopped. In the field, I always knew where he was. Here I keep. He stopped again, and she could see him working through something, the way people worked through things at 2 a.m. when they were still full of adrenaline and the room was quiet. I keep forgetting he's still doing it, that he still knows his job even when I can't. He knows, she said. He's been knowing. Through the door, visible in the narrow gap, she could see Jax sitting in the hallway just outside. He was facing the room, watching. His pressure's going to be fine, she said. You should try to sleep. Yeah, he didn't sound like he believed this was possible. Not right now, she said. Eventually. Something that was almost a laugh moved through him. Okay. She made her notes and went to the door and paused with her hand on the frame. She was thinking about Aldrin, who she'd known by sight for 6 years. The man who always had the right medication ready when she came to the window, who kept a photograph of a golden retriever on the desk and called the dog Biscuit. She was thinking about how a person got from there to a syringe in a hallway at 2 a.m. She was also thinking that she was very tired and that her shift ended in 4 hours and that there was a cup of coffee at the nurse's station that was probably cold by now. Voss, Griffin said, behind her. She turned. Thank you, he said, for everything. Not just tonight. She looked at him for a moment. He was 32 years old and had been undercover for 2 years, and had a dog who understood loyalty in a way that most people spent their whole lives only aspiring to, and he had said thank you in a voice that was not performing gratitude but simply expressing it, plainly, the way people did when they meant it. Get some sleep, Hale, she said. We've got 32 more days to go. She went out into the hallway. Jax looked up at her as she passed. She paused, crouched down. He allowed it. More than allowed. He leaned into her hand slightly, the way he had in the hallway 3 nights ago, and she understood that this was not a small thing from a dog like Jax, and she stayed there for a moment before she stood and went back to work. He testified 31 days later. She knew because Reiner told her, stopping by the floor one afternoon when Griffin had been gone for almost 3 weeks, and the room was occupied by someone else entirely. He told her the trial had started. He told her the testimony had taken 2 days. He told her, with the particular careful neutrality of a federal agent who understood what could and could not be said, that things were proceeding as well as could be expected. And Jax, she said. Something moved in Reiner's expression that might have been the closest he got to a smile. Still on the job, he said. She went back to her patients. Room 3 had a new admission, a 67-year-old man recovering from bypass surgery who wanted to know when he could eat real food. Room 7 was a woman with a post-surgical infection similar to the one she'd managed 9 days ago, which she was treating with the same careful attention she gave everything. Room 9 was a Marine named Tobias Crane, 26 years old, who had been transferred from the VA 3 days earlier and who, according to his chart, had not spoken more than single syllables to anyone since his arrival. He lay in the bed with his eyes on the ceiling and answered yes or no when she asked him questions, and she noted his vitals and adjusted his IV and said, on her way out, "Someone's coming to see you Thursday. Might bring a friend. I think you'll like the friend." She had made 1 phone call to arrange this. It had taken 3 minutes. Crane looked at her for the first time since she'd walked in. "What kind of friend?" he said. "A dog," she said. "Belgian Malinois. His name is Jax." She left before he could respond, which was its own kind of answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. In the hallway, walking back to the nurse's station as the afternoon light came through the windows at the end of the corridor and lay itself across the floor in long, pale bars, she felt something that she might have described, on a different day in different company, as something close to peace. There was more work to do, there always was. She went to do it.